Two chaps, many cultures. Actually, three chaps, many cultures today. And we talk about culture. It doesn't always have to be.
Nope.
In a real sense, how do we get people from different industry styles to actually talk together and
Welcome,
everybody.
the intro was a bit patchy because it was kind of jumping in and out, and I hope I played the video at the right time. You
did,
but that was a video of sorts. So let's assume it all went well. We will find out in the recording. With us today is no other than Mr. Ted Cohen. Thank you for taking time, Ted.
My pleasure. It's great to be here. It was after I watched the show the last couple of times. I waved at you and said, let's do this sometime.
Well, if people wave at me, I immediately lasso them in and say, hey, you got to come in here. And the reason why I was really, really excited to have you say yes to this is because I've been following Ted's professional path ever since our paths crossed. Ted's been around a certain industry for a little longer than I have, just a little. And some of you may know this. I used to work in the music industry, and that is also the industry that Ted has earned his jobs in throughout his long career. And I don't want to oversimplify, but I think that the one thing that always stood out to me about you, Ted, is how you were able to build a bridge between the cultures of the music business and that of the tech industry. And those were two worlds that usually did not get along very well, especially in the last 30 years when the music industry went through such a very grave transition, I might say. You've always been at the cutting edge of combining these two worlds. So I'm excited to hear some of your war stories from that time.
Okay, well, I'll try and give you the briefest. Over the years, I've actually shortened my 30-volume story. I started out in high school and junior high school, actually managing bands and putting on shows. One of the artists I managed in high school is an artist by the name of Eric Carmen, who had a hit called "All by Myself" that I'm sure you've turned the radio off to. But he also then formed the Raspberries, which was one of the greatest pop bands of all time. I went off to college in pre-med because I joked that my mother wanted a nice Jewish doctor in the family. And I got there to Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, and Rod Serling was teaching how to write for television. And I went to the dean of the communication school and said, can I switch majors? And I did. Broke my mother's heart, but I had Rod Serling as a teacher. Continued to put on shows. I was the chairman of the concert committee. I was hired by a local club to go around the Ithaca, Elmira, Syracuse, Cortland, like in 100 miles in all directions, to find new bands, because this was, I'll tell you, 1967. There weren't, cassettes had just come out. Most people had reel-to-reel. And so I would write up a report about a band that I would see in Elmira and try and book them in the club. Anyway, I did that for 2 years until a professor of mine told me to go home for a semester because I was spending too much time. Literally, yeah. He said, I can give you one grade and you'll stay in school. I'm going to give you another grade. You're going to go home for a semester. And I came back to Cleveland, where I was from, and ended up working in a college radio station in Cleveland and then working in retail. And then I got adopted by a bunch of people in the music business in Cleveland, one of which was a guy named Frank D'Elia. Frank was ended up being Michael Jackson's manager. And another was a guy named Billy Bass, who was a local DJ, and a guy named Steve Popovich and Marty Mooney. They were the Columbia Records people and some radio folks. And they basically mentored me and pushed my career forward. And I ended up doing local promotion in Cincinnati for first Columbia Records, then for Warner. But I had a terrible habit of running away with the band. And it was more fun. I have to tell this one thing. It was more fun to work with artists live than it was to go into a radio station in Dayton, Ohio, to a station called Wing, W-I-N-G, Dayton, the home of aviation, to a guy named Ron Vance, who would ask me how the new Doobie Brothers record was doing in New York before he would decide if he wanted to play it or not. And I had to explain to him that, no, Ron, first it gets played in Dayton, then it gets played in Columbus, then it gets played in Chicago, then they play it in New York. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you about this. Anyway, I found that I liked work. I still see him in front of me. Oops. I'll still see him in front of me years later. Anyway, after having a bad habit of running away with the band all the time, they moved me into artist development, which was working with artists. And it was different than any other label in that we actually worked on helping the artists with their live performance, building an audience. It was almost like doing social media before social media. I wasn't a publicist. I wasn't doing promotion. It was helping the artist establish a career. Mm-hmm. And so later, and I'll get into it, but a lot of what I learned about how you develop an artist is how you develop a startup now in technology. And it's the same idea of, Christian, where are you based now?
I'm based in Atlanta. I'm based in Atlanta, and Britt is in Chicago.
Atlanta. Okay, so let's say an artist would say to me, I want to play the Fox Theater, and I'd go, you're not ready to play the Fox Theater. You're going to play at the Agora or Alex Cooley's or whatever it was called at the time. I would say to a client now, you're not ready to speak at South by. We'll go around, we'll meet some people. Nobody wants to see your PowerPoint about your new app. They want to see your new app. Mm-hmm. And the same way, nobody wants to hear you do your one song or whatever at the Fox Theater. So there's a lot of parallels between building a career and building a startup. And the same way that you put a band together is the same way that you put the team for a startup together. It's people that you not only like their skill set, but you don't mind having a meal with them. So in a lot of cases, bands break up because you got a great guitarist and a great lead singer, and they hate each other. And you can have a startup where you have a great CEO and a great CTO, and they can't stand to be in the same room. Mm-hmm. So as an aside, if there's any benefit coming out of COVID right now, is that a lot of people don't have to see a lot of people that they don't want to be in the same room with.
That's an excellent side effect. I never thought about it that way. And I do want to package this a little bit for those of you watching and are 40 years or younger. You may not remember this, or nobody ever told you this, but there was a time when the music scene, when the music industry, when music artists were at the cutting edge, we're in the driver's seat of cultural and social change, especially in North America and Western Europe. Now, those times have changed a little bit, but I think when Ted talks about his growing up in the music business, those times were different back then. And I think I met you in Cannes, in southern France, at the Mediterranean coast of France, for an annual conference called MIDEM, which is a music industry gathering that happens every January in Cannes. And you were part of the group that pushed for basically a sidebar to the MIDEM conference, which was called MIDEM Net, because this was the beginning of the internet age and digital distribution. And you were one of the people who saw the light, so to say. You were one of the few people within the established music business that didn't see digital, that didn't see Napster and all these other things as the ultimate death threat. You saw it as a new wave that needs to be served. And so what was your experience in helping the old timers overcoming their fear of the unknown and trying something new?
So again, I've been working on a book for the past year, and the working title of the book is Tech, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And the premise is that you have iconic creators, whether they're musical creators or whether they're technology creators. So I always say, Johnny Rotten was a pain to deal with, and Steve Jobs was a pain to deal with. Steve Wozniak was a joy to deal with, and Robert Palmer was a joy, but they were all creatives, and there's parallels there. The inarticulate point I was going toward is that career development and startup development, you do things outside the borders. You don't do things the way everybody tells you to do it. So when we were doing artist development, the guy that I worked for, who passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, a guy named Bob Reguer, who really changed the music business. I asked him what my budget was. He said, "You don't have a budget. Spend what you need to spend." I said, "What's the approval process?" He says, "Do what you need to do." So it taught me, rightly or wrongly, to be a forgiveness executive, not a permission executive. So the best example I give was in 1983, NBC Radio said, "We would like to do Roxy Music, Brian Ferry, live from Radio City Music Hall. It's going to cost $150,000. Would Warner kick in $75,000?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, when will you know if it's approved?" I said, "I just approved it." He says, "We have to call somebody." "You have to call somebody." I said, "No, I work for the greatest guy in the world." What I didn't realize was when I didn't work at Warner anymore, I shouldn't keep approving things that I had no right to approve, but I did. So the tools that we used, the other parallel is this, the tools that we used at the time, we would do a live broadcast on WBCN in Boston with Little Feat or Robert Palmer or the Pretenders or Talking Heads. Mm-hmm. Then years later, we started doing webcasts locally. I'm not locally, but promoting them locally. So years later, I did Little Feat from the El Rey Theater in Los Angeles as a webcast, as a web broadcast. Now we're doing, BTS playing to 5 million people around the world and making $20 million for one broadcast. It's using different megaphones. It's the same idea of how do I reach my fans? How do I maximize my impact if you have the goods? But when I was making the transition, I'm still trying to answer the question you asked because I still haven't. I saw that the tool sets, I was working for Amazon and as Christian could tell you, I do talk a lot, and you're experiencing it now. I came off stage from a talk at the Beverly Hilton at a conference called Musicom that I was chairing in 1998, and a woman walks up to me and she says, "Hi, my name is Jennifer Cast. I'm the general manager at Amazon.com. Pause. Have you heard of us?" I said, "Yes." She says, I said, "I buy books from you." She says, "Well, we're going to music and you're going to be our music consultant." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Everything you just said on stage is what I've been telling Jeff Bezos for the last 6 months when we talk about going into music." So I consulted for Amazon for the next 8 months till they launched. And then I went over to a company called Warehouse Music. Mm-hmm. And the week I got there, somebody sent me a note saying, "Have you seen this thing called Napster?" And I logged onto it and I went, "This is amazing." So there was a little box in the bottom right corner of the website that said, "If you're interested in advertising, click here." And I wrote, "Hi, my name is Ted Cohen. Here's my email address. Please reach out to me. I'm interested in talking about advertising on behalf of Warehouse, but I want to know more about what you do." And about 2 months later, phone rings and it's John Fanning, the evil Uncle John. And
for those of you who don't know, that's the guy who developed Napster. Young kid in his college dorm room.
No, this was the uncle who stole it from him. This is John Fanning.
Oh, John,
Sean's uncle.
Okay.
John, who was a venture capitalist, and he said, "We want you to come to work for us." So we talked about it for a little bit, and I said, "I'll get back to you." Fast forward, in October of '99, I flew up to San Mateo, up to San Francisco, and I flew up there thinking I was going up to consult. When I got there, Sean Fanning and a woman named Eileen Richardson, who was the acting CEO, and Bill Bales, who was the acting COO, said, "When can you start?" I said, "Today." And they said, "Don't you have to clear your decks a little bit?" And I went, "No, I've got time." And I said, "What are we talking about?" They said, "Well, you're going to be the new CEO of Napster." And I went, "Can we date for a while?" So I consulted. I literally, John had told them that I was going to take Eileen's place as the CEO. So I started consulting for Napster. And then in November of '99, I don't know if you came, Christian, I had put together a conference called Web Noise.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember.
We had 2,000 people. It was Woodstock for digital music. If there was a coming out party for digital music, it was Web Noise, followed by Plugin, which became the commercialization of the digital music conference. But the folks from Medium that you mentioned from France came to Web Noise and said, "Could you create this, this boutique?" And I said, "Sure." And we came up with MediumNet. I chaired that for the next 12 years. And it was this intro into what was happening with digital, and it did really well, but it also bridged the drop in regular Medium. I don't know if you remember at the time, Medium started to decline rapidly as the music business got hurt. And so we had a fairly full room for MediumNet, but it wasn't packed. And I said to the people running Medium, "I don't want you to tell people it's free, but we want the room to be full. Why don't you say, 'Hey, look, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to let you in.'" And they were, "No, everyone has to pay." So that was another old story. But we bridged that gap. And then, Michael Nash.
I've heard of him. I don't think I met him.
Okay. So Michael currently runs digital at Universal. To explain how we bridge the gap, I can now sum it up after 17 minutes of one question. We were doing a panel in New Orleans about 2 months before Katrina. So like 2003, 2004, whenever Katrina happened in New Orleans. I think it was August of 2003. We were there in March. And Michael and I are doing a panel, and he's running digital at digital business development at Warner Music, and I'm digital business development at EMI. And someone raises their hand in the audience and they said, "I don't understand what you do and what you and Michael do." And I turned to Michael, I said, "Do you want to take it or should I take it?" He goes, "No, you take it." And I said, how many here in the audience know what a fluffer is? Okay, Christian's laughing and Brett isn't. Brett, do you know what a fluffer is?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so a fluffer is the person who works on a porno film to get the actors and the actresses excited before they have to get filmed. So they get the women worked up and they get the men firm. I said, Michael and I are digital fluffers. We get our bosses excited about something they're not really sure what it is, but they know they're supposed to be excited about it. So they can then get their pictures taken in Billboard as the visionaries who signed the deal. And my thing was, I didn't care if I was in the picture. I just wanted to get these new technologies, adopted. So whether it was liquid audio or the Rio player or amplified.com, which was a digital distributor, Napster was a client, the RIAA, all these people, I had to get them to come to the party.
So basically, you were the fluffer at the deep throat of the digital music business, so to say.
Yes, and I'll accept that.
Right. And that
I've always been happy being somebody's number two, making things happen in the background so that we could all move forward.
I think that was that moment when Steve Jobs went on stage and held up a device and says, "By the way, music is now on this thingy here." And
yeah.
After that, I put all my CDs in big plastic or in multiple plastic totes and stored them in my basement. And I still haven't gotten rid of all of them. Because what's the point? Now, the bridging, I mean, I like the fluffer analogy here because it's tongue in cheek, it's kind of raunchy, but I think there's a little bit more to it, right? So you had to bring to the table people with distinctively different views of what the future will be. There's one side of the table that says, I want to keep selling things, shiny objects, ideally in a round shape, and I want to charge premium for it. And on the other hand, you have people who say, I don't care about your shiny objects because we'll have a new one every quarter and we don't know what it will look like a year from now. But let's just create a pathway to making it the best user experience possible. So how were you caught in the middle between those two things?
Okay, so let's say I'll give you a real example, but I'll start with a hypothetical. So if you came to me, let's say 2002, 2003, 2004. So anyway, I was there from 2000 to 2006 at EMI doing digital business development. And you showed me something and I went, this is amazing. I love it. How are you funded? We don't have any funding. Okay, who are you talking to? Let me introduce you to some people. There was one company, I got them a $20 million funding from an Asian communications group. But for you to prove the model, you had to use you had to use music to prove that whatever this app was that you had worked.
Right. They needed your stuff to make their stuff work.
Right. So if you're going to, so I would give you a letter, and I had EMI, Senior Vice President, EMI Stationery. And I would write you the most legal looking letter ever telling you that it was okay to use EMI's content to do your test. So it was sort of a sandbox agreement that you could play in our sandbox. That letter meant nothing. I had no legal right to give you a letter telling you you could use our content. That should have come from somebody in business affairs, in legal, from the chairman of the whatever. I wrote letters. No one ever got caught. A bunch of companies that I won't say who were able to test their hypothesis that their app worked because I gave them a fake letter. In a lot of other cases, one of my bosses would always say, I'd say, good example is Rhapsody. They said, well, how do you know subscription will work? I said, I'm not a finance guy, but instead of having a hit album and then an album doesn't do as well and this and that going up and down, we're going to get a regular pro rata share of consumer subscription month after month, and it's going to balance out the revenue stream. It's going to get rid of the peaks and the valleys. And they said, well,
whole law firms were built upon for hundreds of years. You hire them on a retainer, and there is a certain monthly or annual fee for that, and however much is needed will be pulled. Right? It's how most of us have revamped their business models from a one transaction deal to a subscription model. Right.
Right. So I was selling that subscription worked. They said, well, how do you know, you're not from McKinsey, you're not from Accenture, you're not from Boston Consulting. What do they think? So I said, well, I'll go find out. And I would come back a week and a half later with research from McKinsey and research from Boston Consulting showing how subscription was going to work. Because it took me a week to write the phony reports and put the Boston Consulting and the McKinsey logos on them. Because there was no research. They weren't even looking at it yet. So I had to create, collateral materials to support my hypothesis that subscription was going to work, but I knew it was going to work. The other example, this is a true story, I got a call from Nokia, and they wanted to buy 100,000 songs to give away with Nokia music cell phones that they were doing to compete with the iPod. And they asked for a discount. And I said, I'll give you, I joke using my Harvard, Stanford, Cambridge, Oxford background. I gave them a 20% discount. I went 20% off. So instead of 75 cents a download, it was 60 cents a download. And they said, what catalog? I said, anything you find on iTunes. And I knew I would never get the deal done through the normal approval process for digital deals. So I ran it through an area called Special Markets that I think you're familiar with, Christian. The ones that do the Pottery Barn CD or the Shell Hits of Summer. When you buy 20 gallons of gas, you used to get a CD or a cassette. I ran it through a guy named Eli Oken. I said, here's the money. So it was 100,000 downloads, 60 cents each, $60,000. And then I hired a guy who I think you know, Shakar Oren from Neurotic in Atlanta, who then went to work for Peloton last year. He sold Neurotic to Peloton. But I hired him to do the fulfillment of you. There was a card that came with each phone with 10 scratch-off numbers. You would take a coin like you were checking a lottery card, and you would go onto his website that looked like Nokia, and you'd redeem it to get the 10 songs.
Sounds like the Stone Ages of digital music. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, about 8 or 9 months later, a guy named Ivan Gavin, who was the vice chairman of EMI North America, calls me up. And he was South African Afrikaner, Dutch Afrikaner. And he's screaming at me. I won't use the bad words. You son of a brother, you motherfucker. I caught you. And he's screaming. You thought you pulled one over me by hiding it in Eli's department, but I found it. You cheated our company. You're a cheat. You're a thief. I said, and I didn't say anything. He goes, are you listening? I said, yeah, but two things. I don't work for you. I work for London. And I'm not sure exactly what I did that was so wrong. He says, you discounted our music. You sold 100,000 downloads for $60,000. I said, no, I didn't. I sold the right to download 100,000 tracks for $60,000. They had 6 months to do it. Would you like to know how many tracks were actually downloaded through a Nokia mobile music promotion? He says, how many? I said, 1,000. He says, what does that mean? He says, what does that mean? I said, it means we got $60 a song.
Right.
He goes, how does that work? I said, it's called breakage. So he goes, is this a business? I said, absolutely. He set up a whole digital premium business. Buy a pair of Levi's and get 3 free downloads. Go to Kohl's and buy a gift card and get 5 free downloads. The redemption rate is anywhere from 2% to 5%. In this case, the Nokia redemption rate was 1%. But at the point, I'll get to the end of this, had I written that up as a proposed business, he would have asked for charts and graphs, and we would have to hire Boston Consulting for $1 million to, do focus groups to test the model. So I just went ahead and did it. I have to say to you honestly and not braggadociously, I never screwed up. I never got caught. I didn't do this on everything. I did it on the ones I believed in.
So correct me if I misheard this, and Matt, feel free to weigh in on this. It sounds like you've always been very comfortable with taking a calculated business risk in order to further, not necessarily an agenda, but to further the business or to move into the new age, so to say.
Yes.
You were comfortable with risking your job or risking any type of repercussion that may or may not happen. So is the lesson from that reconciling two different camps takes a handful of people or maybe only one person who is willing to take the risk to maybe sidestep some of the rules of the game?
Yes, I mean, when I speak to students, I always say, if you have the choice, try and be a forgiveness executive, not a permission executive. Because if you ask permission, there is the possibility that they say no. If you're willing to risk your job in something you believe in, you will feel much better about what you do than missing an opportunity. But I always say to them, I don't want your parents calling me saying you got fired because you took my advice. So I'm saying, do it when it counts. But yes, you have to be willing to take those risks. You have to be willing to stand up for what you believe in, or, otherwise it's like at most companies, and I know you both know this, people maintain their jobs just by saying no. But it can't be that. I haven't been that person, so I can only imagine, but I know for me that wouldn't be fulfilling. The thing that's has been fulfilling for me has been the ability to say yes and venture out onto thin ice, but not fall through that ice.
Yeah, I really love that framework of being the forgiveness executive rather than the permission executive, because that frames it in a different way. When I talk to clients and we talk about risk and certainty and things like this is a very kind of, I don't know, they're generic terms we use, but that really brings it into an active mindset type of framework, right? You're saying that somebody, if I'm a person who has my door open, maybe the door doesn't have to be open, but at least when somebody goes out there and we give them permission to have a few swings at the, after all, think about the American pastime of baseball, right? People fail 70% of the time and they're superstars. So this is basically the idea of the mindset. So outside of the culture of the US, it's great when we were able to kind of put a description like that into it and say, if you're coming here and you come from more of a permission hierarchical structure, think about it in terms of forgiveness and permission, and basically saying that, try and get the barriers out of the way of your subordinates so that they can actually take an active role in developing new things and going forward. And also, I just want to mention, I really love your stories about the early days of wanting to always take off for the band. I think that's great. I mean, I'm a performer. I spent a lot of time on stage as a lead singer, and so I really, I always wanted to play. It was always about playing for me. We had
I'm sorry. I got offered a job once because I went to see Led Zeppelin in Atlanta at Fulton County Stadium before they tore it down. And, one of the old Cereal Bowl stadiums, which is a horrible place, but it had its time. Kristen can tell you, they all looked like cereal bowls. They were all over the country. They're all gone now. But I went there, and the regional Atlantic Records promotion man, we meet him on the concourse to get our tickets. And he said, I've got bad news. There's no tickets in the box office. And I said, what do you mean? He says, the tour manager didn't leave them. So I said, let me see what I can do. And about 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, I find the tour manager and I said, hi, my name's Ted Cohen. I'm with Warner Brothers, but I'm here with the Atlantic guy, but the tickets aren't in the box office. And they said, you might have them. And he goes, yeah, they're right here. But how did you get on stage? And so I had talked my way through 70,000 people up onto the stage in the middle of the baseball field. And the president of Atlantic Records was on stage. And he turned to me and he said, call me Monday. And so I didn't know what he wanted. I called him Monday. Yes, Mr. Guy named Jerry Greenberg. I called him on Monday. I said, hi, Mr. Greenberg. You told me to call. What's up? He goes, when can you start? I said, what are you talking about? He said, you walked through 70,000 people without any credentials. Yeah, I need to hire you. And that became the lever with Warner and going into artist development, because I had to tell Warner that I was offered a job by Atlantic, and they said, doing what? And I said, artist development. They said, you'll do it here. So I stayed for another 14 years. So you just have to be willing to just, get out over your skis a little bit, but don't fall down. Try not to fall down.
Was it maybe part of your upbringing? So you said you grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and if I'm not mistaken, your family is of Jewish heritage. So is it this? Yes. Is it this Rust Belt Jewish? We have to make it work for us somehow mindset, no matter what it takes, over, under, or through, whatever it takes, I will do.
It's a little more complex than that. My father was in the dry cleaning business. He got up every morning at 5 a.m. and left by 5:30 and was in the dry cleaning plant. Even though he had people working for him, he would go there to make sure that, there's a term about having steam up, turning on the boilers. And I said, And there were, even back then, there were timers that would actually turn them on. But he would go, and so he would work 6 days a week and then take Sunday off. My mother was a creative. She put on big events for organizations in Cleveland and wealthy families that wanted to end up in the society page. So I ended up getting this hybrid of creative and work ethic from the two of them. And it became, there's always a way to do it. So to build on that, when I was at Ithaca running the concert committee, I booked Eric Carmen's band to come to Ithaca, forgetting that nobody else at Ithaca knew about them at the time. But I knew how good they were. And it's 5 o'clock Saturday, and the spring dance is at 8 o'clock, and we haven't sold 10 tickets because nobody's ever heard of this band. So the performance area, they were all by themselves. Oh, that's great. Oh, you will get credit. You'll hear somebody get quote. You'll say Ted quoted you a week from now. Anyway, they were all by themselves. I went up to the top floor of the student union building where the dance was going to be. That was on the 4th floor. The cafeteria was on the 1st floor. And the 4th floor had sliding glass doors that opened onto a terrace. I opened all the doors. I told the band to start practicing. They said, "We don't need to practice." I went, "Yes, you do." And I knew them for a few years. They started playing like they were doing a show. People from the cafeteria started coming upstairs and sneaking their head into the dance, into the multi-purpose area. The line started at 8 o'clock. The line didn't stop till 10:30. The dance sold out because it was before build it and they will come. It was, if you have the goods, there's a way to let people know that they have the goods. And that my thing has always been, don't get stuffed. There's got to be a way to make I'll give you another example really quick. I was doing a CD-ROM for the Cranberries in '95. It's called Doors and Windows. It came out. But in the middle of it, Island Records got a new president. They were pulling the support for it. And the new president of Island Records was a friend of mine, a guy named Johnny Barbas, and this taught me a lot. I called Johnny up and I said, Jonas is pulling support for this thing that I'm working on, this Cranberries disc. And he goes, "Teddy, is it good?" I said, "It's brilliant." He said, "Do you stand behind it?" I said, "Absolutely." He says to his assistant, Pat Monaco, is with him for years. He says, "Pat, get Jonas on the line." He gets Jonas on the phone. And here's where it went sideways in an amazing way. I expected the normal music business, any type of like entertainment. "Why are you messing with my friend Ted?" Instead, he said, "Ted just got done telling me how supportive you've been on this project. That's wonderful. I think it's fantastic. And I really appreciate that you've been backing this. And now that the light keeps falling over. And now that I'm here," there we go. "And now that I'm here, you have my support." So he didn't beat him up about pulling support. He congratulated him for being so supportive. So and it ended up getting completed. Yeah, you don't always have to use the hammer. Kindness works a lot better 90% of the time. I always joke that people say, "Are you Teddy, Ted, or Theodore?" I said, "I'm usually either Teddy, and I'm only Theodore when everything else has gone to shit. Then then Theodore comes out."
I think the what I take away as the big learning here today is that sometimes, or maybe more often than sometimes, it helps the cause if we bypass some of the established frameworks of how to do business, and it takes somebody with a vision to see it through. And I thank you for sharing these stories, Brett. I know you're a music guy yourself, not on the industry side, but you were raised in the creative part of it. Something that I always looked up to, literally looking up to now. Something that I always admired is that people are in the creative industry. They suck it up and do anyway. A quality that not all of us are born with, or not a skill that all of us are naturally inclined to. So it was a great reminder for me to, like Brett and I like to quote Seth Godin, just ship the work. Let's get to it.
Yeah. That's it. You know, I'll tell you another thing. I was lucky enough to work on things. I chose the things that I got to work on. The assignments I was given in artist development was to work with a bunch of baby bands between 74 and 84. And my baby bands were Van Halen, Prince, Fleetwood Mac, Talking Heads, Pretenders.
Never heard of them. Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. And, you know, so fast forward, my girlfriend Maggie and I were in Las Vegas in 2014. Monster Headphones used to do a big concert every year at CES. And we were at the Fleetwood Mac show. We're standing backstage as the band comes off stage. And the band members are coming down. I said, "Hi, John." He goes, "Hi, Ted. I'll see you in a little bit." And Mick Fleetwood comes down. And I went, "Mr. Fleetwood." He goes, "Mr. Cohen." I said, "I'd like you to meet Miss Blackwell, my girlfriend." He goes, "Miss Blackwell, do you know that your boyfriend is the reason we're famous?" It was a great night. It was a nice night. So I like when things work.
So you're using other people as fluffers. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, exactly. So I mean, it's been very enjoyable, and the minor frustrations have been worth it. I get to meet people like you.
Nice.
Excellent. Ted, thank you so much for taking time for us. This was enlightening and entertaining at the same time. This is lovely. Stay safe. Enjoy the road trip in your RV, and hope to cross paths again soon.
I hope to talk to you again, guys, soon. This was great. And I want you to know you got in 3 more questions than most people do. I had one person who interviewed me and never ran it for a long time. I said, "Why not?" He said, "I asked you a question and then 45 minutes later said, 'Thank you.'" So this was fun. Thank you.
We got the questions in. Awesome.
Enjoy your trip. Thank you very much.
Chaps, many cultures. We'll see y'all again tomorrow. Have a good one.
Bye.